I'm in the big leagues, told him don't miss me. Ballin' like Houston, ayy, feeling like Whitney. I need a bag, bruh, send it through quickly. I'm making his dog, like I'm in the big leagues. Told him that I gotta go, dog. I'm riding a road, y'all. I think that I'm back in my bag now. So I need that go, y'all. Got hits when he throwing the fastball. Just too quick for it, peeling off like the whip orange. Seen they effort, this piss poor. I got too much, I gotta take.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Another Turnover, the basketball podcast where a basketball fan with zero basketball credibility gives his opinions on what's going on in the NBA, opinions that nobody asked for. As always, I am your host, Mr. Chris Aaron Murphy, aka Aaron, and ladies and gentlemen, let's just jump right into it. Folks, quite a bit of things that I want to get to on today's show, so let's hop right in and get to it. First of all, this is the first show in February, so I got to give a shout out, happy Black History Month, to all of the incredible Black and Brown people over the years that have contributed in the technology space and inventions and all kind of different stuff where they contributed to society. We want to celebrate all of those. So I wanted to do something to, like I said, celebrate with it being Black History Month at all. So every show for this month, I'm going to have just a little trivia question that relates to Black history as well as relates to the NBA and basketball in general. So the question I want to ask for today's show, which I will reveal the answer at the end of the episode. So make sure you listen to the whole thing so you can hear the answer. But question I want to ask is, who was the first Black player to be drafted into the NBA? First Black player drafted into the NBA. It's probably not going to be who you think it is. So that answer will be revealed at the end of the episode. But let's just jump right in. So the All-Star reserves just got announced. As I'm recording this Thursday night, it just happened like 20-30 minutes ago or whatever it was. So let's talk about it. Let's see where I was right, and let's see where I was wrong, and let's see where I was incredibly disappointed. So let's start. Let's start in the Western Conference. So reserves got announced in the Western Conference first. So the All-Star team in the reserves are picked by the coaches in the NBA. One of the rules is they cannot pick their own guys, which obviously makes sense. But in the West, we know that the reserves are going to be Devin Booker, no surprise there, he's having a phenomenal season. Luka Doncic, another no surprise there, he's playing pretty well. Rudy Gobert, which usually makes the All-Star team every year, as well as Donovan Mitchell. Both have had solid seasons. Utah's having a pretty good season. They've had a little bit of a skid here recently, but they've had a pretty good regular season overall. CP3, Chris Paul, aka the point guard, is going to be back, in the All-Star game as a reserve. Karl Anthony Towns is going to be in the All-Star game. I believe this is his second All-Star game selection. I could be wrong. It might be his third potentially, but and Draymond Green is going to be back in the All-Star game. So that is the reserves for the Western Conference. Now, as I was going through my, not last show, but the show before that, where I talked about my predictions and who I wanted to see on the All-Star team, I actually picked correctly all of these except for one. Surprisingly, I didn't have Chris Paul in the All-Star game, but it is because I had Deante Murray in his spot. So unfortunately, Deante Murray will not be, has not been selected as an All-Star reserve, but there's still hope. Draymond Green is dealing with I believe a calf injury. So Draymond Green will not, he announced tonight, Thursday night, that he will not be able to play in the All-Star game. So that leaves hope for the guard in San Antonio, Dejounte Murray, to be an injury replacement. Hey, if you're an injury replacement, you're still on the All-Star team. You are still an All-Star. So I'm holding out hope. That is my last hope that my boy Dejounte Murray will make the All-Star team. If not, that's fine. I've already cried once about it, and I'll probably cry again. But that is the Western Conference All-Star reserve. So let's go over to the Eastern Conference. Each conference was kind of similar. There was two that I didn't pick correctly, but let's talk about it. So Darius Garland making the All-Star team for the first time, having a really, really great season. Cleveland has definitely exceeded expectations significantly. So Darius Garland's going to be on the All-Star team for the first time. Jimmy Butler, overall pretty solid season. Miami is number one in the Eastern Conference right now. James Harden, who's kind of had an up and down year, but I mean, such a popular player, I'm not that surprised he's in the All-Star team. Zach Levine is going to be on the All-Star team, I believe, for the second time. Chris Middleton in Milwaukee will be on the team as well. Jason Tatum from Boston, one of my favorite players, is going to be on the team, as well as for first time, Fred VanVleet in Toronto will make up the Eastern Conference Reserve team. Now, I had picked all of these correctly except for two. I didn't pick Chris Middleton or Jimmy Butler to make the team, mostly because they were injured for a good chunk of the season so far. But, head coaches picked them in, which is great. I did have LaMelo and Mchale Bridges taking up those two spots. I also had Zach Levine as a starter and Trae Young as a reserve, which those were flip-flops. So Trae Young is going to start and Zach Levine is going to come off the bench. But, they both made the team. But yeah, I did have LaMelo and Mchale Bridges making it in Charlotte. Well, I wanted to see them make it. But you had Jimmy Butler and Chris Middleton taking up those spots. So pretty good mix overall. I mean, not a whole lot of surprises. Happy for Darius Garland and Fred VanVleet making their first All-Star appearances, which is pretty cool. Some snubs. Obviously, Deante Murray is probably the big one for me. Obviously, as a Spurs fan, of course I wanted to see him make the team. You can make the argument that Jason Tatum was arguably a snub as well. And there was a couple of other names that surprisingly didn't make it. But hey, there's only so many spots. Not everyone can make it. Injury replacements are a thing, so we'll see what ends up happening there. But those are going to be your NBA All-Stars for 2022. So pretty exciting stuff. I'm looking forward to watching the game. But let's transition a little bit. Let's talk about this past week. Let's talk about some of the best games of the week. Just a couple of games that I wanted to talk about. This was Tuesday, February 1st. The Phoenix Suns and the Brooklyn Nets taking on each other in a Western Conference, Eastern Conference powerhouse meeting. So the Phoenix Suns defeated the Brooklyn Nets 121-111. Now, this was Phoenix's 11th straight victory, which is pretty crazy if you think about it because, one, they already had a win streak this year. They won 18 in a row, if I'm not mistaken, before they finally got beat by Golden State. 13-1 record for the month of January. When I gave my show last week, that was my end of the month show. They were 11-1, so they won two more games before January ended. So 13-1. They are playing incredible basketball. Specifically, their big three is incredibly formidable. Big three being CP3, Devin Booker, and DeAndre Ayton. Obviously, they're battle tested. They made it all the way to the finals. We're 2 games short of winning a championship. In this game against the Brooklyn Nets, Devin Booker put in 35 points. We all know he's a certified bucket getter. Chris Paul, point guard, had 20 points and 14 assists. DeAndre Ayton didn't even have that, much of a game in terms of the stat sheet, but he did put in 12 points and 6 rebounds as well. Some things that we could be expecting from him, given that he is in a contract year trying to play his way into a contract. So I don't see those numbers staying like that. But overall, solid game, pretty efficient game for him as well. But the player of the game has to go to Mchale Bridges in Phoenix. I was looking at his stat sheet. I was like, holy cow. 27 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, shot 10 of 14 from the field. He arguably has a case for making the All-Star team too, because he has played really well and has been very consistent for this Phoenix Suns team as their 4th option. He's definitely in the running for most improved player for me. Mchale Bridges, I really, really like his game. Plays the game on both ends. Is a sleeper on offense. If you sleep on Mchale Bridges, he can drop buckets. 27 points is no easy feat. If he scores like that, with that amount of production on both ends, offensively and defensively, Phoenix is going to be tough to beat. They can literally beat anyone in the Western Conference or the Eastern Conference. So it'll be interesting to see what ends up happening there. But Phoenix is pretty solid all around. Cam Johnson had 16 points off the bench. Jay Crowder only put in 3 points, and they still were able to win that game by 10 points. So Phoenix, like I said, battle-tested. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with them later on in the season. Now, Brooklyn struggled offensively for most of this game. James Harden did have 22 points and 10 assists, as well as 5 rebounds, but shot 6 of 19 from the field, so not a very efficient night. Similar story with Kyrie Irving. Had 26 points, but took 20 shots to get there, went 10 of 20 from the field. Blake Griffin had one of his better games of the season. I thought he was out of the rotation, but they probably need him now with the injury to Kevin Durant. 17 points and 6 of 10 from the field. Now, Obviously, no Kevin Durant for Brooklyn. So with Kevin Durant, this, obviously would more than likely be a different game. Not saying that Brooklyn would automatically beat them, but with that three-headed monster of Kyrie, KD, and James Harden, they're all great individual talents. This was their 5th straight loss, though, that is for Brooklyn. They're on a road trip right now. 6th straight they have lost as of now. They lost to the Sacramento Kings 112-101. I believe that was Wednesday night, so 2 days ago when you're listening to this. So all of that begs the question, should the Nets be concerned about their lack of consistency that they've had so far this season? And I would answer that question, yes. I mean, how many times have we seen Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving all play together this year? I don't think it's happened yet, or it's only been maybe 1 or 2 games because of, Kyrie Irving's been out. There's been extenuating circumstances, injuries across the board to, James Harden as well as Kevin Durant. And then Kyrie Irving's vaccination status, not being able to play in New York City. There's been extenuating circumstances with that. But, like I said, they're all great and individual talents on their own. But you need that camaraderie, you need that chemistry going in, and we saw that in the playoffs. When they went up against, obviously, the injuries to Kyrie and James Harden, I get all that. But you need that repetition. They need to be able to play together for an extended period of time going into the playoffs. When I think about big threes, I think Milwaukee's big three and how formidable they are because they play together. They have enough games. They know each other's tendencies and whatnot. It's not hero ball. And, Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, and Giannis Antetokounmpo all complement each other very, very well. I think when they've all played, together, they're 19-4, 19-5, some absurd number. So, they're very, very tough to beat when all 3 of them play together. Now, another wrench in part of this question, should they be concerned about the lack of consistency? Brooklyn probably should also be worried about James Harden's free agency status. He has made it known publicly that he has never been a free agent, and he really would like to test the free agent market. That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to leave, but that does mean he could potentially leave and you get nothing in return for him. There are a lot of rumors about, this is a side note, a lot of rumors about Daryl Morey wanting to make a trade for James Harden to bring him to Philly, doing a sign and trade with Ben Simmons and all that stuff in the offseason. Whether that happens, it remains to be seen, obviously, but that would be pretty interesting if that did end up happening. But I would say that if Brooklyn doesn't make it to the finals at the very least this season, there is a very strong chance that both Harden and Kyrie Irving are out in Brooklyn. With Kyrie having a player option this summer, he could opt out of his deal. Brooklyn has already stated that they are not going to extend the max extension offer to him. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. With Brooklyn, I definitely think they should be worried about their lack of consistency, but we'll see. Obviously, I'm just a fan. This is a show from a fan's perspective. So we'll see what happens. But let's talk about another game. Let's talk about Wednesday's game, the Memphis Grizzlies and the New York Knicks at the Garden in New York City. The Memphis Grizzlies ended up winning this game 120-108. Now, I've talked about Memphis a lot on this show so far this year, and deservedly so. Memphis has been balling out. They are currently 36-18 with a record, a third best record, in the Western Conference. Third best record in the league. Memphis has arrived, and they are ready and primed to make, I would say, arguably a deep playoff run. Now, in this game specifically, John Morant did say he thought he played horribly. Looking at the box score, pretty good game. 23 points, 9 assists. Not a particularly efficient night from him. He did shoot 9 of 27 from the field, but excellent play from the others in Memphis. Jaren Jackson Jr., Triple J, at 26 points, 10 rebounds, shooting 8 of 14 from the field, so pretty efficient night for him. Zaire Williams also put in 21 points. Desmond Bane had 13 points and 7 rebounds. So all overall solid output from most of the guys in Memphis. So I definitely think they're gonna be a tough out in the playoffs. As it stands in the standings right now, if the playoffs were to start today, they would potentially play Golden State in the second round. Now, if you remember last season, I know last season was last season, but they did beat Golden State in their play-in game to end up making the playoffs. They also beat Golden State, they handed Golden State their first loss in the new building for this year when Golden State had started the season like 8-0, 9-0, whatever it was. Memphis was their first loss. So Memphis matches up pretty well with Golden State. Now, obviously, they have beat them without Klay Thompson and James Wiseman. We're still waiting James Wiseman's return to the NBA and in the starting lineup, for the Golden State Warriors. So I could definitely see that being a very tough back-and-forth series, potentially a 7-game series. I mean, who doesn't love a 7-game series, right? But it'll be interesting to see what happens with Memphis. I think I wouldn't necessarily call it an Achilles heel, but I could see their youth and inexperience in the playoffs kind of be their downfall if they ended up playing a team like Golden State in the playoffs. But it should be interesting to see what happens. But Memphis beating the New York Knicks in the Garden 120 to 108 this past Wednesday. But let's talk more All-Star news. Let's talk the All-Star Slam Dunk participants that are rumored to be, this came from Shams. Everybody in the NBA circle knows, Shams, one of the most credible reporters. But dunk contest participants this year are projected to be Jalen Green in Houston, rookie, second overall pick in this year's draft. Cole Anthony in Orlando. Juan Toscano-Anderson from Golden State. And Obi Toppin from the New York Knicks. So when I was going through this and looking at the rumors of who was going to be in the dunk contest, I was like, man, these guys are young. Like, these are all either second year or younger. I know Jalen Green was drafted this year. I think Cole Anthony was drafted this year. He could be a sophomore. I could be wrong about that. Forgive me if I am. But it seems like there used to be a lot more veterans that did the dunk contest back in the day. I remember, I was a little kid, but when Vince Carter did it, he was relatively young. But you had Dwight Howard was in it all those years. You had Nate Robinson who did it for all those years, and those guys were vets when they did the dunk contest, or seasoned NBA players at the time when they did it. But recently it seems like it's more young guys, which I guess makes sense because young guys, the younger you are, you got a little more bounce or whatnot. But it is unfortunate that we never got to see a dunker like LeBron James participate in the dunk contest, but hopefully is exciting. I feel like the dunk contest hasn't lived up to its expectations when Zach Levine and Aaron Gordon went back and forth back in 2016. Like, those guys, that was the best dunk contest I had ever seen. Like, they went into overtime, which was insane. Aaron Gordon did get robbed. He did have the better dunks, but Zach Levine's dunks were pretty amazing too. But in relation to the All-Star Game events for Saturday night, there's been no announcement yet for the Skills Challenge or my favorite competition, the 3-point challenge. We can assume that, your Steph Currys and whatnot are going to be in the 3-point contest, but they have not announced that just yet. So we shall see what happens. But let's talk about this weekend. Let's talk about this weekend's marquee matchups coming up. But first of all, before we talk about this weekend, let's talk about last weekend, because last weekend I didn't do so well, y'all. I mean, there were 3 games I had picked out, if you remember correctly. So last Friday, I had the Boston Celtics and the Atlanta Hawks. Last Saturday, I had the Brooklyn Nets and the Golden State Warriors. And last Sunday, I had the Denver Nuggets and the Milwaukee Bucks. And yeah, I picked one of them correctly. So I did pick Saturday's game correctly, the Warriors beating the Brooklyn Nets at home. But I did pick the Boston Celtics to win on the road. I don't know why I did that, because the Boston Celtics have been so inconsistent. Atlanta did end up winning that game. I also picked the Bucks to beat the Nuggets at home, which I didn't think would be a stretch. But the Nuggets beat the brakes off the Bucks in that game. Like, they won by darn near 30 points. So one out of 3 for last weekend. That brings my season record to 16-11. So I mean, 5 games above 500, not terrible, but I can be a perfectionist, so not exactly where I wanted it to be, but it is what it is. Well, let's talk this weekend. Let's talk about the games that are coming up for this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Games that I think you should look out for, games that I think that you should watch, and games that are going to be pretty fun. This one's going to be fun for my coworkers and I. I have Friday's game tonight. The Houston Rockets are taking on the San Antonio Spurs in San Antonio at AT&T Center. I have the San Antonio Spurs obviously winning this game. I do have a bet with a coworker over a chicken sandwich over this game, so the San Antonio Spurs better win this game. So I have them beating the Houston Rockets at home in San Antonio. Saturday's game, I picked out the Miami Heat and the Charlotte Hornets. I've got the Miami Heat taking that game on the road. They've been playing some pretty good basketball as of late. They're the number one seed, I believe, still in the Eastern Conference. But the number one seed is separated by, like, seeds 1 through 6 in the Eastern Conference, I was looking the other day, are all separated by, like, 2 games or whatever. So, like, that could change significantly here over the next few weeks. But I do have Miami winning that game on the road. And then Sunday's game, I have the Atlanta Hawks and the Dallas Mavericks taking on each other at the American Airlines Arena in Dallas. I do have Dallas winning this game. It's always fun, I think, this matchup between Trae Young and Luka Doncic, because if you remember correctly, a few years ago in the 2018 draft, they were traded for each other. Then Atlanta traded up to get Trae Young, whereas Dallas ended up taking Luka Doncic, in which it's kind of hard to, like, see who won that trade, because, like, this is a sidebar. Like, both of these guys have been incredible talents. Trae Young has had a deep playoff run where Luka has not made it past the first round as of yet. But, like, Luka is the better player overall, I would say. I mean, in my personal opinion, they are very similar styles. Both are pretty bad on defense overall, but both can drop buckets, like, and are both incredible playmakers. I mean, I would say Luka's obviously has a better post game. You know, he's a lot stronger and bigger than Trae Young is, but it's really hard to say. Like, you can make the argument for either team that they won that trade, because both are phenomenal talents. But those are the games that I picked out: San Antonio over Houston, Miami over Charlotte, Dallas over Atlanta for this weekend. So we shall see what ends up happening. But let's go back to my Black History question and give the answer. So if you remember, who was the first black player that was ever drafted into the NBA? And the answer is Mr. Chuck Cooper. He was a second-round pick, first pick of the second round for the Boston Celtics in the 1950-51 season. So all those years ago, he was the first ever player drafted. Now, surprisingly, he wasn't actually the first black player to play in the NBA, which is pretty interesting, but that's a story for another day. But ladies and gentlemen, that is all the show I have for you folks today. As I always say, thank you so much for watching. If you're on YouTube, thank you so much for listening. If you're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, pretty exciting. Next week, we will find out next Thursday, we'll find out the draft for Team LeBron and Team Durant, if I'm not mistaken. They're the ones who get to pick. They are the captains. So that'll be fun. And then the All-Star will be the following week after that. So pretty exciting couple weeks coming up here. I'll have another Black History trivia question next week. But as I always say, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe and take care.
Yeah, I told him I'ma hit it out the stands. I deserve another 100 bands. I deserve another 100 fans. Told them this was always in the plans. I just did it cause they said I can. Blowing euros when I'm down in France. Labels asking how I build a brand. Told them put a check up in my hands. Boy got time, no cap. Made a few checks, but they all in the raps. Had a few friends, but they suck in the past. I don't even trip when I'm thinking about that. Hopped in the whip and we all in black. Shawty wanna ride to the hop in the